Loving a married woman often feels like stepping into a story that was already written long before you arrived. No matter how strong the connection is, no matter how deep the emotions run, you must face the truth that you are entering a life that has years of history, responsibilities, and emotional roots. You are not simply falling in love with a woman, you are falling into the middle of a life she has already built. And the moment you do, everything becomes complicated, because whether you admit it or not, you become secondary. Not because you are not worthy, not because she doesn't care, but because she already has a primary world she is tied to. And that world will always come before you. People often imagine love as two people choosing each other freely. But when the woman you love is married, choice becomes limited, restricted, and filtered through obligations. She may want to talk to you, but she cannot call you anytime she wishes. She may want to meet you, but she must calculate time, excuses, and consequences. She may want to give you her heart, but she cannot give you her life. And this is where the slow emotional imbalance starts. You begin adjusting, waiting, compromising, accepting crumbs of affection, simply because even those small pieces feel meaningful. But you forget that she has someone else who gets the majority of her time, presence, and daily life, regardless of how she feels about you. The part that hurts most is that you don't just compete with another man. You compete with her history, her home, her marriage, her children, if she has them, her social circle, and the identity she has built over years. These things are not easy to walk away from, and they shouldn't be underestimated. Even if her marriage is emotionally weak, even if she feels neglected, even if she feels alive only when she speaks to you, she may still choose to stay in her marriage simply because it is the established structure of her life. You remain the emotional escape, the hidden warmth she goes to when her real world feels cold, but not the man she can build a future with. As time passes, you begin to understand this imbalance more deeply. You are always available for her, but she is rarely available for you. You wait for messages she sends only when she can, not when she wants to. You wait for her attention, knowing she will return to her husband afterward. You wait for moments that last minutes for her, but feel like lifelines for you. And slowly, without realizing it, you lose a part of yourself. You start accepting the role of someone who is important but never prioritized, loved but never chosen, valued but never claimed. This is the painful truth. When you enter a life she has already built, you are entering a space that does not belong to you. You are borrowing time, stealing moments, living in emotional corners. And eventually, no matter how strong your heart is, it begins to ache under the weight of knowing that she has a whole world you will never fully be a part of. A relationship that exists in shadows might feel exciting in the beginning, but over time it becomes one of the most emotionally exhausting experiences a person can go through. When you love a married woman, nothing is ever fully yours. Not her time, not her presence, not her attention, not her love in the open. Everything happens quietly, secretly, and carefully, as if your entire connection is something that must be protected from the world. And while secrecy can feel thrilling at first, it eventually turns into a constant reminder that your place in her life is hidden, temporary, and fragile. You are not part of her daily routine. You are an exception she makes when circumstances allow. You're not someone she can introduce proudly. You're someone she must keep in the dark. You begin to live on borrowed moments, quick calls when she's alone, silent messages late at night, stolen conversations during her breaks. These small interactions become the highlight of your day, yet they are only side moments in hers. You start valuing every minute she gives you because you know how limited it is. But loving someone in the shadows means that the relationship can never grow naturally. There is no room for openly expressing affection, no opportunity to build memories in public, no chance to spend holidays, weekends, or important life moments together. Your love stays confined to secret hours, hidden chats, and brief emotional escapes. This kind of relationship forces you to adjust emotionally. You learn to accept being invisible to the world. You learn to hide your feelings in public. You learn to silence your desires, even simple ones like wanting to hold her hand in daylight or wanting to be seen with her. You learn to live with uncertainty because nothing about the future is clear. She cannot make promises, she cannot commit openly, and she cannot risk being discovered. Even if she feels deeply for you, her fear of losing her marriage, her reputation, her stability, or hurting her family will always influence her actions. The relationship becomes something fragile, beautiful in emotion but weak in reality. And the worst part? You start lying to yourself. You tell yourself that secrecy is just temporary, that one day she will choose you, that the hidden relationship will eventually become something real. But deep down, a part of you knows that shadows rarely turn into daylight. A bond built in secrecy struggles to survive in the real world because it lacks the foundation of honesty, openness, and stability that every relationship needs. Over time, the shadows begin to feel heavy. You crave a normal relationship, one where you can be acknowledged, appreciated, and seen. You want to hear her call you mine without fear. You want to exist in her life without restrictions. But loving a married woman means accepting that your love must remain invisible. And as the days pass, you realize the emotional truth. Being hidden slowly destroys your sense of worth, because no matter how meaningful the connection feels, a love lived in the shadows can never give you the light you deserve. When you love a married woman, the emotional imbalance begins quietly, almost unnoticed. At first, it feels mutual. She gives you attention, warmth, affection, and a level of emotional connection that draws you in deeply. But as the relationship continues, you start to feel a shift. You begin giving more of yourself, more time, more emotions, more loyalty, while receiving less in return. Not because she doesn't care, but because she simply cannot give equally. She lives in two emotional worlds, and you are the world that must remain hidden, restricted, and carefully managed. You feel every moment intensely, while she is constantly balancing her feelings between you and the life she already has. And that imbalance becomes the silent weight that slowly pulls you down. In a normal relationship, both partners can express their love freely. They can ask for time, demand clarity, expect consistency. But when you love a married woman, those basic rights don't exist. You cannot complain when she disappears for hours or days. You cannot ask her where she is or who she's with. You cannot expect her to answer every call or reply to every message. Her obligations always come first. Her husband, her household, her responsibilities, her image, her role in society. You learn to accept this without argument because you know she is balancing more than just feelings. She is balancing a life built long before you arrived. But acceptance does not erase the pain. It only teaches you how to hide it. The more invested you become, the more you adjust your expectations downward. You start celebrating tiny gestures, a short call, a stolen moment, a message that says she misses you. You start valuing what would be considered the bare minimum in any normal relationship. Meanwhile, she becomes the center of your emotional world, but you are only a corner of hers. She cares, she feels, she connects, but she cannot prioritize you. She cannot give you her evenings, her mornings, her routine. She cannot build a future with you even if her heart wants to. And deep down, you feel the imbalance growing even if you try to ignore it. Emotional imbalance also means you carry the heavier side of the risk. You fear being forgotten, replaced, or left behind the moment her marriage stabilizes or her guilt grows stronger. You fear the day she decides that continuing with you is too dangerous. She may fear consequences, but you fear losing her entirely. And that emotional vulnerability becomes a silent suffering that eats at you gradually. You give her emotional certainty, but she gives you emotional instability. You offer her your heart, but she offers only what she can spare. With time, you begin to notice how much of yourself you've given up. Your confidence starts to depend on her attention. Your happiness revolves around her availability. Your mood is shaped by her replies. This imbalance turns you into someone who is always giving, always hoping, always adjusting, but rarely receiving what you truly need. And the worst part is, you keep telling yourself that the small pieces she gives are enough. You convince yourself to settle for less, believing that loving her is worth the sacrifice. But emotional imbalance is a slow poison. It teaches you how to love intensely, but also how to lose yourself quietly. It shows you the sweetness of connection, but also the bitterness of being someone who can never be fully chosen. And in that realization lies the painful truth. You deserve more than fragments of affection. You deserve someone who can love you openly, fully, and equally. One of the most painful parts of loving a married woman is realizing that the deepest hurt doesn't always come from what happens between you. It comes from everything that can never happen. You don't just fall in love with her, you fall in love with the idea of what the two of you could be if circumstances were different. You imagine a future with her, a life with her, moments with her that feel so real in your mind but impossible in reality. And that gap between desire and possibility becomes the place where your heart slowly breaks. It's not her fault and it's not yours. It's the nature of loving someone who cannot fully choose you. Every time you feel close to her, every time she opens up emotionally, every time she shows affection, there is a painful truth hiding in the background. She will always return to a world where you do not exist. You may be the one who understands her heart, but he is the one who shares her home. You may be the one who comforts her emotionally, but he is the one who stands beside her publicly. You may be the one who knows her soul, but he is the one society recognizes as her partner. This reality hits hardest at the moments when you feel most connected to her. Because you know that the deeper your love goes, the more powerfully you feel the sting of the things you can never have. You can't plan a future with her. You can't talk about living together. You can't dream about marriage or building a family or growing old side by side. These are dreams reserved for someone else, someone who occupies a position in her life that you will never be able to take, no matter how deeply she cares for you. And the pain comes from knowing that if things were different, if timing were kinder, if life had placed you two in another situation, you might have been perfect for each other. But love, as powerful as it is, cannot change the circumstances of her commitments. She belongs to a world that you can only touch from the outside. The hurt also comes from the limits she must place on her feelings. She might want to call you more often, but she can't. She might wish she could spend entire days with you, but she can't. She might want to give you her full heart, but she can't. Everything she gives you is filtered through guilt, fear, responsibility, and restraint. And even if she loves you deeply, she cannot love you freely. That distinction becomes the wound that never fully heals. You're not losing because you're not enough. You're losing because the situation doesn't allow the connection to flourish. But perhaps the most heartbreaking part is that the relationship is always temporary, even if it lasts years. Deep inside, you know there is a limit, an invisible wall you cannot climb because her life on the other side is already built. You are living in the chapter that's never supposed to exist. You are loving someone who must leave you eventually, whether by choice, guilt, or circumstance. And that knowledge sits heavy in your chest because loving her feels right. But keeping her feels impossible. And this is the truth. The pain doesn't come from her absence. It comes from her presence. The kind of presence that reaches your heart but can never stay long enough to build a future. The pain comes from loving someone deeply, knowing that the version of the relationship you want will never be real. You are loving her with a full heart while accepting a reality that only offers you half a life with her. And no matter how strong you are, that truth leaves a mark that is hard to erase. Timing is one of the most ruthless forces in love, and when you fall for a married woman, you learn just how unforgiving timing can be. It doesn't matter how deep the connection is, how natural the bond feels, or how perfectly your souls align. If she met you at the wrong stage of her life, everything becomes complicated, restricted, and ultimately impossible. You might be the man who understands her better than anyone ever has, the man who listens to her fears, supports her dreams, and sees her in ways no one else ever bothered to. You might be everything she wished she had found earlier, but life doesn't always give people love at the right time, and when it comes too late, it becomes a beautiful tragedy instead of a real relationship. You begin to realize that timing shapes everything between you. If you had met her before her marriage, before her responsibilities, before her children or social obligations, your story might have unfolded naturally. You might have built a life together, grown as partners, and embraced each other openly. But meeting her now, when her life is already structured, when commitments have already been made, means that even the deepest connection must live in restraint. Every moment you share with her is a reminder of the life she lives without you, a life she cannot break regardless of how much she feels for you. This is where timing becomes the silent villain in your love story. She may feel things she can't express freely. She may dream of a future she cannot create. She may wish she could choose you, but her timing forces her to choose stability, responsibility, and the life she already built. You aren't losing to another man. You're losing to time itself. You are losing to a version of her life that began before you arrived. She is not rejecting you. She is trapped by a timeline she cannot rewrite. And even if she wants to be with you, even if she feels alive in your presence, in a way she doesn't feel anywhere else, she must constantly consider the consequences. Losing her marriage might mean losing her family, her reputation, her financial security, or the stability she has relied on for years. Love alone cannot outweigh the entire structure of someone's life. That is the cruel part. You might be the emotional right person, but she married at the practical wrong time. You walked into her life when she was no longer free to choose solely with her heart. The tragedy of wrong timing is that it doesn't erase the love, it intensifies it. You want more because the connection feels so natural, so powerful, so rare. But the more you want, the more painful it becomes to realize why you can't have it. You have the emotion, the chemistry, the bond, but none of the freedom required to turn that connection into a future. Eventually, you start to understand that love is not just about what two hearts feel. It's about where those hearts are in life. And if they're not in the same place, no amount of love can force them together. That truth hurts more than rejection because it doesn't say you're wrong for each other. it says you're perfect in the wrong moment. And that is a kind of heartbreak that stays with you long after everything else fades. The lesson becomes clear. You cannot fight timing. You can love deeply, you can connect intensely, but you cannot rewrite the life she has already built. And accepting that truth is one of the hardest and most painful parts of loving a married woman. The hardest truth of all when it comes to loving a married woman is that, ultimately, you must choose yourself before you lose yourself completely. It's easy to get swept away by the intensity of forbidden love, to believe that your heart can survive on stolen moments and hidden affection. You tell yourself that the connection is worth the pain, that the love you feel is rare and worth fighting for, even if it exists only in secrecy. But the reality is far harsher. When you invest your emotions in someone who cannot fully choose you, you risk losing your identity, your self-respect, and your ability to value yourself. The longer you stay, the more you adapt to being secondary, the more you shrink yourself to fit into a life that will never be yours. When you continue loving someone who cannot commit to you openly, you start to build your emotional world around her availability, around the small pieces of attention she can spare, around moments that she could just as easily withdraw. You begin to measure your worth by how much she engages with you, rather than by your own value. You start to rationalize compromises that, in a healthy relationship, would be unacceptable. You accept being hidden, accepting uncertainty, accepting frustration, and all the while convincing yourself that these sacrifices are signs of love rather than warning signals. But in truth, they are slowly eroding your sense of self. You begin to live in her world as a shadow, and shadows don't thrive. They only exist at the edges, constantly bending to the light of someone else's life. Choosing yourself means recognizing that love alone is not enough. It means understanding that someone who cannot be with you fully is, no matter how much she cares, not the person who can give you a complete life. You deserve more than fragments, more than secrecy, more than waiting for moments that may never come. You deserve someone who chooses you openly, proudly, and without hesitation. Someone whose life aligns with yours, not conflicts with it. And sometimes the most courageous decision is to step away, even when your heart wants to stay. Walking away does not mean you stop loving. It means you respect yourself enough to protect your heart from a love that cannot be fully returned. It also means reclaiming your time, your energy, and your emotional stability. When you choose yourself, you stop living in anticipation of stolen moments. You stop arranging your days around someone else's commitments. You stop giving your heart to a world that will never fully accept it. Instead, you open space for relationships where love is mutual, where commitment is shared, where you can exist fully in someone else's life, not just on the periphery. Choosing yourself is a declaration that your heart is valuable, that your time is precious, and that your emotions deserve a future, not just fleeting moments. This truth is bitter, yes, but it is also liberating. The moment you accept that a married woman cannot give you the life you want, you begin to free yourself from the slow suffocation of secrecy and imbalance. You begin to heal to regain your confidence and to prepare for a love that will be equal, open, and fulfilling. Choosing yourself is not giving up on love. It is giving yourself a chance to love fully, without compromise, without hiding, and without regret. It is the only way to honor your heart when it has been drawn into a story that was never meant to be yours entirely.